Okay, next up, we're going to talk about the back end of the store. John Sheriff, who's been a service parts consultant for a number of years, is going to come up and present. I don't know how to change this thing now.
Good afternoon, everybody. John Sheriff, Sheriff 5-Star Fixed Operations Consulting. Let me just go through real quick. Anyway, we're going to, I know this is, I don't know, do I have any service managers, directors in here? I don't think I do I? So anyway, I've kind of modified, and in fact, you all have a copy of the actual PowerPoint. I don't want you to get nervous. There's a lot of slides in there. I'm going to probably go pretty quick. And in fact, what you have, I've already taken 30 slides out of it, so I'm going to try to move along pretty quick. Because of the crowd that we have and the not being fixed ops people, I'm going to try to really share some stories of things that I see in stores that maybe when you go back to your store, you say, hey, you know what, that's something that I see. So I'll probably use a lot of examples because, believe me, after all the years I've been doing this, I've got plenty of examples. But I want to go through and just touch on a few things. Let's touch here. And these are things that we'll move through pretty quickly, but we're going to be looking at defining the service manager's key roles, how to forecast the fixed operations, a little bit about effective labor rate and gross profit relationship, technician benchmarks, the key to sales process, how to reduce unapplied labor, key performance indicators, and then actual financial results. You know, when I go into a dealership, as I sit with a service manager, you know, and obviously being a service manager or director is not an easy gig, and there's a lot of things that they have to do. But what I tell them, I said, you know what, when you break this all down, there's really three major things that you have to be able to perform. You've got to really have employee satisfaction with your own people. You've got to be able to retain people and attract people. Obviously, we know how important customer satisfaction is, and of course, a big key is the departmental profitability. I was in a store not long ago, and I spent about 4 days with a service manager. And after the fourth day, he sits me down, and I'm not used to this. He says, hey, I don't believe a word you're saying. I'm like, really? I said, can you expand on that? He goes, well, my factory rep was just here, and he says I'm doing a fantastic job. I said, well, can you tell me what he means by that? He said, well, we're number one in selling tires and wiper blades. I said, well, let me ask you a question. How much do you get for a wiper blade on labor? He goes, well, we really don't charge any labor. We do it for free. I said, well, tell me about the tires. Well, the tires, they're discounted. We get about $10 a tire, and we discount the labor because the other competitors do it for free. I said, let me ask you, what was your net profit in your store last month? He goes, well, we made $1,200. I said, well, that's why I'm here. And you know, and the reason I bring that story up is it doesn't happen like just one time. This happens pretty currently when a rep comes in, and I used to be a rep, so I understand this. They look at certain criteria, and again, that's what I'm trying to get down to, is that you've got to get a return on investment for your dealer. You can't just sell the factory stuff and not look at the whole picture. In terms of management to succeed in this operation, you have to have two major skill sets. And I think I'm going to share some examples so you can see in your store where does my manager or my director really fall into place. So we have administrative management and operational management. And I'll give you some examples. I was in a store recently just to talk with the manager. I had a store, they had two franchises, so I could go from one store to the other, but just by walking down the hall. So I'm going to see the service manager, and we'll call her Mary. At this point, her name wasn't Mary, but anyway, so I'm looking and say, hey, Mary, where's Mary at? Well, she's actually PDI in a car. So I buzz over to the next door, I come back later. Where's Mary? Well, she's also got the license to do the state inspections. And I called last week to follow up. Not that I had anything to do with this, Mary's not there anymore. Operational management. I'm sorry, that's operational management. Excuse me, I mixed those two up. So that's operational. Administrative-wise, I've gone into stores, and probably the most far example I can give you is I'm going in to talk to a director. They got the charts, the graphs all over the wall, and I'm having a conversation about, hey, we're having a problem getting advisors to do a walk around, get them to perform, holding people accountable. He says, well, John, I don't understand why. I sent the memo out to everybody. I'm like, man, wouldn't that be great if we could just send a memo? It's obviously, in terms of managing your people, a memo, we all know this, we're not going to get it done with a memo. But the point being is, as a manager, you've got to be able to have skill sets on the administrative side and on the operational side to really have a balance. Of course, I try to teach that to them as well, to see that we have skills on both of those platforms. And you can't have one without the other. Three basic systems really in fixed operations. We have a management information system, selling, and production. Management information system, and again, there's more to it, but basically departmental forecast, the production reports for technicians, advisor performance reports, work in process, labor inventory, scheduling, and of course I get technician there twice. I guess I thought that was really important. When I go into dealerships, very seldom do I see, what I want to spend some time on is the departmental forecast. Very seldom do I actually see, well, what I hear a lot of times is when we have a conversation about selling, you may hear this in your store, well, I can't sell anymore because we don't have enough techs. And what I'm getting is that so many stores, I don't see that they actually measure that number to be able to explain that to anybody. And I get sometimes that we may not have the right techs, but what's happening, and I think this might hit a nerve with some of you in here, is that we'll find that when I start to back into the numbers, we're in the 70 to 80% range of technician proficiency, and we've got all kinds of unapplied labor. Somewhere that doesn't jive. But the bottom is that there should be some reports in place, and although you may have reports to your DMS we talk about the production reports, those are typically going to be technician efficiency, because most of your DMS reports are going to track the labor hours that a technician generates versus the times they're flagged on a ticket. The problem with that is it's not the complete picture. What's more accurate is the time that they actually produce versus how long they're in the dealership. And typically you're going to have to run a separate report, probably one from your time cards and then take one from the basic production. Because you could be very efficient but still not be proficient. Because again, as an example, efficiency might be, I have a 4-hour job, I produced it in 2, so I'm highly efficient. But I've still only produced the 2 hours out of the 8 hours. So that becomes kind of a problem. So that's why typically, again, when we have these conversations, and again, I just had the conversation with a manager the other day. How'd the month go? Well, I didn't have any time to upsell this and this and this. We're at 86%. I was in a store not too long ago, and the actual dealer, they brought me in, they said, hey, John, you know what? We don't have any growth. I want you to go see what's going on in my store. So I go into the dealership, and I'm listening to an advisor conversation with a customer. The customer drives in, says, hey, I'd like to make an appointment for tomorrow because I'll be over here, and I'd like to be here at 10 o'clock. So, and I hear the advisor saying, well, you know what? He's looking at his sheet. I can't squeeze you in. And of course, I can't do anything at that point. I kind of want to go grab the guy, but I can't go do that. So I'm listening to this conversation. So once the customer leaves, I pull the advisor aside and say, hey, you know what, what went on with that conversation? He says, well, the customer wanted to come in at 10 o'clock. He goes, I looked at my appointment sheet, and that line is full. I said, let me ask you a question. In this particular case, they actually did run the reports. I said, what was the efficiency or the proficiency for they actually had a group system, for your group this week, as well as 82%. Okay, I said, when a customer comes in on an appointment, do they typically come in on the exact right time? No. Do you think you could put her in there? Oh, I see what you're saying. The key is what's happened is we have a lot of advisors, we have people that run a lot of appointment coordinators that are scheduling work and really don't understand the shop load. And what's happening is we're shoving people off, and of course there goes our growth, because we don't have that measurement in place. So it's very critical that we put that measurement because in this particular case, we're losing business and we're sending people down the road where they may be going somewhere else, and we had plenty of room for them. And in fact, in addition to that, we're probably having unapplied labor on the other side of the equation. This is just a quick, how well you can see it, but basically there's really three measures: production, efficiency, and proficiency. Again, just an example, I use many different sheets. Sometimes the problem that we have is that technicians tend not to get off the repair orders. So when we even track the production or efficiency, it's only as accurate as the technician getting off the repair order. I always explain to technicians, you know what? It's in your best interest, when you're done with that ticket, clock off that repair order because it's given us some erroneous numbers. So the key, again, that's why I like to use proficiency. It's just a matter of hours we generated versus the hours they were in the dealership. But again, that's an example of all three calculations. It's hard to get them to clock off. And the other problem is sometimes when they're on multiple tickets, they can't totally clock off the repair because they're trying to juggle two tickets, or because warranty wants them to clock on, they're playing games, so to speak, to try to build time on one ticket. So we get some inefficiencies within those reports. But it's important that we have that. So again, here's actually, so in your sheets that you have, at least you have some what the calculations actually are. So those are really the three measurements. And again, as I mentioned, proficiency is probably the most important. And the key is, it's one that you typically don't have. I was in a store not long ago talking to a director, and he brought me in. He wanted to tell me, hey, he just got into CDK. He's got electronic dispatching that practically runs all by itself. He's running 90% something efficiency. And of course, okay, well, you're running 90% efficiency. You're at a 1.4 repair order, and the store's not making any money. So the key is we have some inaccuracies in the measurement. We're not generating enough hours on the other side, and no matter what you think, the department's not going to run all by itself. It just doesn't happen. There's a lot of software out there that can help you, but nothing runs automatically all by itself. Here's, when I go into a dealership, in fact, I had a couple calls from stores already before I came here. And what I do, especially when the store does not actually have the proficiency calculations, and I don't know how well you can see it, but anyway, I will actually extrapolate the information off your advisory reports, off your financial statement. What I'm looking for is what are the hours on a typical month that we're generating. So in this particular case, it's 1222. I've got the CPROs, the warranty internal, the hours per repair. We take it times the effective rate, the dollars, extrapolate the numbers. But right now I'm looking for the hours. When I come up here with the number of days in a week, the number of hours that the tech works each day, and how many techs I have. So in this particular example, with this given month that I have, I think it's of March, we're doing 1,492 hours with the manpower at 100% theoretically. To perform this set of numbers, what you're already doing, we only need 86%. And what I'm getting at is that's what they were actually doing. So the key here is I'm looking at a store that's running a 1.5 repair order, so I know that we can increase that. I know that 85, or I can't say the number, 86%, there's room for us to grow there. Because when I go to a dealership, depends on what I'm going in there for, but a lot of stores I work with, part of my compensation is based on the increase of performance, sales, and gross. So not only does the service manager need to know this, I need to know what's the high and low watermark as to what this store can do with the people you have and what's going on in the store without any increase in repair orders. So here's our set of numbers on a before basis. Return it next to you here. And here's what, and these are actual numbers. So now we've taken it to 2 hours per repair order. What we also did, and I have a spreadsheet that we'll break it out for you a little cleaner for you. We increased the effective rate with some pricing, selling some different things. We picked up the gross from 78 to 80%. Obviously, it increased the hours. Now we're at 100%, which helps because that will also reduce unapplied labor. We pick up the gross, we pick up the labor, we pick up the proficiency. And because it's a little hard to read, I have a sheet next to us that breaks this out. So in a couple of months, with some days of work here and there, we picked up half an hour per RO, or 205 additional hours, 14% increase in technician proficiency. We retained 2% more of gross because we increased the effective labor rate. The gross profit's up $25,006, $9,300 in parts, almost $35,000 CP labor and parts gross profit. And the reason I use this store is because it's one I'm working with currently. It's actually a small store. And that's one of the reasons I want to use this as an example. In this day and age with these labor rates at $100 plus per hour, it doesn't take a heroic performance to dramatically increase the gross. I mean, I shouldn't even admit this, but I started in this business when we had labor rates of $38 an hour. Now we're running at 100. So you start picking up 1, 2, 3 tenths, $100 an hour, you add the parts to it, and there's $35,000 on 400 repair orders. And that's the same store. When I walked in, he says, hey, we need more techs. Now, we are getting more techs, but to do the kind of work we're talking about, rotates, balances, throttle bodies, you don't need an A-level tech to pull that off. So this is a pretty typical set of numbers. It's a pretty small store. It's a real set of numbers. So that's that example right there. Effective labor rate. It's a key performance indicator. When I go into a dealership, what I try to do is I have a little interview with the advisors. And I ask them, how do you calculate effective labor rate? And maybe when you go to your stores, you can do the same. You will be shocked at how many advisors have no idea what it is. I mean, sometimes they come up with they kind of sort of figure it out, but a lot of them don't really know what that calculation is. And my concern is, these are the same people that are actually booking the repair orders. They're the one closing repair orders. They don't even know what effective labor rate may mean. But again, it's a very important piece of the equation. And again, I just put your advisor know the calculation. You may want to ask your advisor, hey, what's effective labor rate? Hopefully they know, but I tell you, surprisingly, more times than not, they don't. What drives effective labor rate? Obviously, overflagging technicians, discounts. Depends on where you put the discounts. If you discount it right off the top of the sale, it's going to affect the labor rate. Ineffective service pricing, lack of knowledge, and obviously lack of accountability. I was in a store one time, and ironically, the hours per repair seemed too high. I was in a Toyota store, and they were like, this is years back, over 2 hours per hour. So I knew something was going on. I finally had a couple young ladies who were advisors, and I got to give them credit. They're very honest. I said, hey, let me ask you a question. Let's say you sell a service, and there's extra money, or you overquoted the dollars. What do? Well, I convert that to labor time and give it to the technician. So what they're doing is they're overflagging the tax. What they're doing, they're putting in too much time, so they're reducing the gross and really manipulating the hours per reporter. So the key is we need to have a knowledge of overflagging. What should the performance be? We also like to look at discounts, which usually should be around 1% of the sale. But again, effective rate. Well, speaking of effective rate, and I'm doing this for my friends at O'Connor and Drew here, you know, when they come in and actually try to do a warranty, if you're trying to get your warranty rate up, obviously it's very important to ensure that you're up to speed on your customer pay rate, or they're going to have to go through about 1 million repairs to try to get the numbers to jive for you, right? So obviously we want to get that number to reality. The labor inventory, the most difficult inventory to manage because it turns over every day. By tomorrow, that inventory is gone. And the key to making that inventory work is trying to turn it at a higher than 100% proficiency. So if you can turn it over at a higher than face value, That's how you get a return on investment of that particular inventory. And again, we just talked about that. Increase the rate, increases the retention, and of course, in excess of 100% proficiency will actually give you a better return on investment of your labor. Reason for excessive unapplied labor: fragmented selling system, lack of carryover inventory, shop loading, staff levels. Here's a very important slide. When we look at, because for some reason, a lot of people like hours per repair to be like this mystery. And there's no mystery to it. What happens is, there's really three components to a service sale. What that customer gives you, what we as advisors do at the point of sale, and what the technician brings to the party through the multi-point inspection. So many stores that I go to, what happens is we have two components. We have what the customer gives us and maybe what the technician brings to the table. When I go into these stores, 95% of the increase in profit will always come from this right here. Because usually, I say usually, or I guess it's the stores that I go to, usually this doesn't exist or it's not being done very well. And here's the example how that's going to go down. Customer walks in, hey, I want a Lugo filter. And I hear this all the time. Anything else? When I hear the word anything else, I know we're in trouble. A lot of times I think, well, maybe they meant, are there any other concerns? But then there's no other conversation. And then maybe we'll bring something up on the multi-point later in the day. The other one I hear often is this. Customer comes in for a Lugo filter. Do you want to do a tire rotation? It's better than anything else. But as I tell advisors, you know what? Customers really don't want to buy a tire rotation or wheel balance. We teach that anytime you make a recommendation, you need to throw a feature and a benefit in there before you make the presentation. Hey, Mr. Customer, you know what? I know the factory does recommend a rotation at this time. We find it's a good idea to maybe do a wheel balance as well to really prolong the life of the tires. Can we take care of that while the vehicle's here today? We end on convenience. We vary the price back here, but we put in a feature and benefit. And that's really when you can start to crank up your point of sales by having a process on the driveway where there's some good word tracks. I was in New Jersey, so it shouldn't be a surprise. I said, guys, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go out there. We're going to give them a little fluff. We're going to end on value. We're going to give a little warm and fuzzy feeling. Present the features and benefits. So I'm sitting there listening to the advisor, and customer comes in, and he starts to write the repair order up. Mr. Customer, I got some good news, I got some bad news. He goes, the good news is I can't get it fixed today, I get it done by Friday. The bad news is it's $700. Customer says, you know what? None of that sounds like good news. So anyway, I had to actually go in another room and laugh. I couldn't believe it. I came back, had a conversation with the advisor, and said, you know, you may want to rethink that little word track. He goes, why is that? I said, well, the customer said there was no good news. And he goes, well, it works pretty well. I said, well, you're at 1.3 hours per repair order. The customer sure didn't seem to like it. So I think you could probably maybe enhance that little word track, maybe to give a little better love when we're making that presentation. But anyway, in this particular case, here's what actually happens. So, and again, this is probably pretty much a domestic store. There's the 1 hour per RO, there's the 3. So if we're doing nothing, I shouldn't say nothing, if we're doing some multi-point and taking care of what the customer wants, we're probably going to run a 1.3 to maybe a 1.7. Once we add in and have an effective sales process, now we end up in more of the 1.8 to the 2.5 area by having a process at the point of sale. So now what we're doing is that we proactively have a process versus just writing what the customer asks for and hoping that we get something from the multi-point. And that's really the key to it. And we just showed you on a 5/10, we just picked up 34,000. And when you think about it, almost everything we have to sell in service is a half an hour. You know, there's only a few services that are 1 or 2 tenths. So in reality, if I sell one other item, I'm somewhere, I like to say two. If I can present two, I get a 50% closing ratio, I just got my half hour per repair order or my $34,000 based on that number. The J.D. Power survey, when I first saw this, I couldn't believe it. I thought, you know, I do believe this. Only 29% of service advisors recommend a maintenance service beyond what the customer initially requested. That's actually a J.D. Power survey. And that kind of tells you, when we look at hours per repair order, where the bar is set. So when we start to look at hours per repair order, that's based on this actually taking place. That's why in some stores, you could actually do so much better than the benchmark numbers of, say, a 2-hour repair order. And I've got advisors that actually do that. We talked about that. Those are word tracks. Those are, if you're hearing that in your store, you know that there's probably some opportunity, because that's not an effective sales process to ask the customer, is there anything else, or do you want to do? We need to provide a feature and benefit and show them why they should do the service. How to increase the CP sales performance, debunk the myth, remove the obstacles, implement a defined selling system. And again, when I say remove the obstacles, when I sit down with advisors, we try to work out and explain to them, okay, we do have enough text. And we try to remove what they think are obstacles to try to get them on the right platform, to know that here's our expectation, here's the reality of what we can accomplish, and here's how we're going to get there. Defined selling system, obviously a service pricing strategy, menu pricing, appointment setting. And here's one that works very well. A little tough to get it to happen, but you know, I explained to advisors, you know, let's say that we have an appointment system where I have customers assigned to me. How tough would it be when Mr. Smith comes in for his lube oil filter? The customer they come in for their service. Mr. Smith, you know what, I know you're here for the oil change. I took delivery last night to look at your history. Based on your mileage and this, here's what we suggest. So I believe in what we call a pre-appointment sales preparation. Have a game plan when that customer walks in so that you know where you're going to be going with that customer. A walk around, you know, and that's an interesting word, because walk around can mean many different things. Some people just walk around. But a walk around should be an interactive reception where there's some Q&A and some conversation. Again, I spend a lot of time working with advisors just on and role playing that process. Menu sales, you know, a lot of stores will say, well, we have a menu. A lot of stores will have a price list. I utilize a process where it's interactive. There's the menu. When we present the menu, the price isn't really there. We can present the features and benefits, and once we add up and discuss a few items that we may be looking at, then I click a button, the price populates, and now we can negotiate if we need to. So we're not actually just selling the price, we're selling the features and benefits. We're giving it one price instead of several prices, and now we have a much better chance of selling more services. The multi-point, which is we know what a multi-point is, the active delivery and the follow-up. I was in a store recently, and again, speaking of that menu, I had a dealer say, hey, John, I want you to come in. Before you leave, we will be using this menu. And I got one of the advisors got right on board. Had one advisor didn't really jump right on board too soon. And I'll never forget the customer had come in, he had the menu, he did his presentation, the customer came in for a oil change and rotate. I think he sold him $300 worth of items. So that's pretty good. Well, all of a sudden the customer comes back. I'm like, so I'm trying to get away because I'm like, I don't know what he's going to do. He comes back over to the computer with the advisor. He goes, you know what? I think I'll take one of these. I think we should probably do this. Throw in a set of tires. By the time they got done, it was $1,400. When the other advisors saw that, that was the turning point when she became sold on the menu. Not that the menu typically sells that way, but again, it's a visual presentation. We are visual buyers. I had a dealer once tell me this. I thought that was pretty interesting. I never really thought of it, and I thought, hey, this is pretty good. This is pretty interesting. He said, you know, you work pretty good for McDonald's. So yeah, that's a pretty good point. Obviously, we need to present it, but we are visual buyers. In so many stores, there's nothing to see. Do you want to rotate? Do you want to wheel balance? Or they may not be doing anything. But the key is if I can present a menu, get them to interact, then we can actually really start to turn the number up a little bit. This is kind of just a look at the menu. Again, it's interactive. Starts with no price, and then of course it populates, and everything has a feature and benefit to it, but it's an actual selling process or a selling system. I think I'm going to skip that for now. You folks have a lot of we've got some benchmarks in there so that you can actually start to look at for yourself. The ROs per day, just some basic information, the posted rate versus the effective rate. One of the keys here is, though, gross profit. I've got some domestic stores running closer to 80%. It's getting tougher and tougher because I know technicians are holding us hostage because, again, they're so hard to get. But really, you need to be about, I call that minimum wage. You got to get 75 for the profits to fall below the line for you. And you just got to keep working the effective rate to get yourself to that number. Some stores, again, I do have some domestics that are closing on 80%. A lot of imports will run about 80%. Parts somewhere there. Depends on the franchise. This a little bit, I mean, I see sometimes posted rates 150 and their effective is 80. It's just not even on the same planet. So we have to work on some of that. Just again, some more key performance indicators. Proficiency 120, usually domestic. Import closer to 130. Productivity is just a measure of the time they're on a repair order. Technician productivity is more of a measure of us keeping the technician busy. Here's just a few, and again, on my website, you've got, if you want to look, there's already just tons of stores. Here's a Lexus store that I had worked with. I don't know, we picked up $172 per RO in 1 month. That's $135,000 a month, $50,000 in gross. Again, it's a big store. It goes back a few years ago in a Lexus store. Here's a Chevrolet store, 1.5 for the end of the 2.05. Pretty much that's the increase per month. Almost 57,000 sales, 34,000 a month in gross. And actually, we did track that. That was for 12 months. Almost 34,000 for 12 months. Effective rate 81 to 90. Hours per repair to 15 to 205. You start to see the increases of 33%, 47, 55, just increasing the sales, the gross, the parts transaction. When you sell labor, you're going to have 70, 80 cents on parts that come with it. Here's a Honda store. This was a big Honda store years ago. 57,000, 32,000 in gross. Another Honda store, 100,000 increase in 1 month, 51,000 in gross. Another Honda store. This one I measured all kinds of things because we had a real issue with discounts, and we started trying to reduce the discounts. We had the service manager was actually sick. The advisor started actually just taking coupons out of drawers. Every time a customer came in, he'd just throw a coupon at everything. So we had to track the coupons. We reduced the discounts. We increased the effective rate, the dollars per repair order. So in this particular case, we went from a January gross parts and labor from 82 to 147,000. And that is about it, folks. And that was very, very fast. Questions? Just like the last one, huh? I know a lot. I know we don't have fixed ops people, but that you understand the increase of the half, and I say half an hour per repair order. Easy to put it on the numbers, but we do that all the time. And that's, you're looking at stores where that potential is there. When I go to a store, I've never looked at, in my initial forecast, increasing the volume. We're looking at what's taking place in the store right now. What can we do with the people that you have? What are we missing? That's why we ran the forecast where we actually back into it. Then we start to look at what can the store do with this RO count with the people we have on staff right now. And And that's really where I've made my living for 29 years, is taking the store from point A to point B. And then we start to look at growth once we address the current operating systems. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, folks.